Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry that it's been so long since I last posted a video. I've recently begun a new program, which has kept me pretty busy. But to make up for my absence, here are 5 movies that I acknowledge have a lot of problems. Some of them are downright awful, and yet these are movies that I can't help but like, for one reason or another. And before I start, I can only ask you try not to judge me too harshly. Number 5. Heavy metal. Yes, I know it's over the top. Yes, I know the individual stories are short and don't allow us much of a chance to get to know the characters. Yes, the nudity is very exploitative towards the female body. But I still like this movie, and not necessarily because of said nudity. I honestly like a lot of the animation and characters in this movie. The soundtrack is also great, and it really adds to some of the scenes in the movie. The overarching story of the Lochnar adds some actual depth to what happens in the stories themselves, and while a couple of the stories aren't as interesting as the others, there are some genuinely cool and funny moments placed throughout. And the voice work is really fun to listen to. John Candy, Eugene Levy, John Vernon, and so many others all bring these characters to life. And yes, the fact that it's a Canadian movie does make me a little biased. But I honestly don't think Heavy Metal is a terrible movie per se. There's some real talent behind this, and it comes out often enough for me to consider this a pretty low guilty pleasure. I'm not too ashamed to admit Heavy Metal has its qualities. Number 4. Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. This was the first Kevin Smith movie I'd ever seen. I was about 14 years old, and the movie was on TV one day. I only saw about 20 or 30 minutes of it, but in that 30 minutes, I had never heard so much swearing in all my life. And then in my late teenage years, I went through a Kevin Smith phase where I thought Jay and Silent Bob were absolutely hilarious. I still think Smith is a talented writer and director, and I still think Jay and Silent Bob have their moments, but the appreciation for them has definitely gone down since then. I actually like them a lot more in the Clerks movies, where they felt more like real people rather than just caricatures. But all that aside, this movie still has moments that make me laugh. Even though it's wildly immature and nonsensical, it's a real treat for Kevin Smith fans. Loads of characters from the earlier View Askew universe movies show up in the cameos of this film, as do a lot of other famous people. Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back is also one of the few movies where Will Ferrell made me laugh, and for that alone, this movie deserves a spot on this list. Number 3. How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Nostalgia Critic and Nostalgia Chick have both given their 2 cents on this film, and honestly, while I can totally understand Nostalgia Critic's views, I'm more in line with the Nostalgia Chick. I was part of the group that she alluded to in her video. That group of people 10 years younger than her who went to see the Grinch movie and enjoyed it as kids. The same thing happened to me. Now keep in mind, I had already seen the animated Grinch film when I saw the live-action one, so even then I was confused about why they had a big action scene explosion in the movie, or why the Grinch suddenly had to have a love interest, or who all these sub-characters were. But for the most part, I did enjoy it. Jim Carrey gives it his all in the movie. He really is trying, and he managed to bring me along for the ride. It's occasionally appeared on TV during the holidays, and my family have sat down to watch it. Faults and all, we somehow get a kick out of this silly and over-the-top adaptation of a children's classic. Now, of course, there are a lot of moments that make me cringe, even if I do kind of like this movie, but the point is I just kind of get through it and just watch for the parts that I do like. It's definitely one of the most interesting Jim Carrey performances I've ever seen. And yes, even that has its flaws, but anyway, it's really hard to explain some of these guilty pleasures, as you could probably tell, but it's just the case with me. This one, I can forgive. I think it's partially the nostalgia factor and the fact that my family and I can all sit around and laugh at it, ironically and unironically. But either way, it deserves to be on this list. Number 2, Kangaroo Jack. This one was a very serious contender for the number 1 spot, and for good reasons. The humor is insanely childish, the plot is very contrived, very stupid, and yet it will always hold a special place in my memory. This is another case of watching the movie when you're young and having fun making references to it. My best friend and I ended up watching this for my birthday party, and we both thought it was hilarious. We constantly referenced it to each other over the years, and surprisingly, in a non-ironic way. We genuinely did think it was funny. So I can't condemn a bad movie for giving me a lot of fun childhood memories. Even if Jerry O'Connell and Anthony Anderson are not necessarily that funny, they have enough chemistry and talent to make me appreciate what they're doing. Or maybe those are the rose-tinted glasses, but either way, they managed to pull it off somehow. The fact that my best friend loved it so much as well is also what helps pull me through it. So I forgive the misuse of Michael Shannon and Chris Walken. I forgive the forced romance subplot. I forgive all the jokes that I realize were pretty silly in hindsight. If my friend wanted to watch it today, I would sit down and watch it with him. And I'd probably laugh as well. But now for number 1. The Room. This one might not be too surprising for those who know about this movie. For those of you who have no idea what this movie is, basically it's been hailed as one of the worst films ever made. The whole plot of the movie focuses around this selfless, noble protagonist who looks after this young neighbor because the young neighbor has no one else to look after him, and meanwhile the protagonist's best friend and girlfriend cheat on him with each other, and it's just such a mess. Clearly there is no acting talent in the cast, and the effects are silly, the movie is so long and padded, the screenplay makes no sense. Tommy Wiseau's incompetent handling of direction, screenwriting, and acting are all made very clear in this film. But the thing is, it's so bad that you love it. I recently went to a special screening of The Room in my home city, and it was one of the funniest experiences I've ever had in the cinema. The audience all started making inside jokes at the screen, laughing amongst themselves, yelling out jokes in the middle of the movie. I haven't been to a Rocky Horror Picture Show screening, but I imagine that's exactly the same kind of attitude and actions that take place. It was really funny. And I'd already really liked The Room as a very terrible movie to laugh at, but going to that special screening gave me an even deeper appreciation for this terrible, terrible movie. You can have so much fun watching this movie. It's kind of like what my brother would call craptacular. I mean, some bad movies I had no enjoyment out of watching. For any of you who remembers his review of Mega Shark vs. Crocosaurus, I sat through that movie too with him, and I hated it. But with The Room, I couldn't help but laugh. It was so silly. I know they're called guilty pleasures for a good reason. I'm not necessarily proud of admitting my appreciation for some of these movies, but that's the case. These movies are terrible in their own ways, but I still like them anyway. Anyway, that's my top 5 list for you guys. Try not to judge me too harshly, and I hope all's going well. Until next time.